Imagine a power so dark it could summon spirits from the underworld to alter the course of history. This video uncovers the real history of necromancy, from its ancient origins in shamanistic rituals to the forbidden sorcery of the Middle Ages. We'll explore how this mysterious practice evolved, combining astrology, magic, and the power of the dead to defy both the church and the natural order. Stick around to the end to discover how necromancy still influences secretive practices today and what modern conspiracy theories claim about its hidden power. The origins of necromancy are far older and more complex than the image most people have today of wizards raising the dead. In fact, the earliest forms of necromancy were less about reanimation and more about communication. The word itself derives from the Greek words nekros, dead body, and manteia, prophecy or divination, which gives us a clue about its ancient roots. In its earliest forms, necromancy was a type of divination that involved contacting the dead to gain insights or foreknowledge of future events. We can trace necromantic practices back to early human civilizations, especially in the context of ancestor worship and shamanism. Early societies believed that the dead, particularly ancestors, retained knowledge and wisdom that the living could no longer access. These beliefs were common in many ancient cultures, from the Neanderthals who performed burial rituals for their dead, to early human settlements in Jericho, dating as far back as 7-220 BCE. Evidence of rituals meant to honor and communicate with the dead can be found in these sites, suggesting that early humans considered the dead to have ongoing influence over the living. The first organized forms of necromancy appeared in shamanistic practices. Shamanism, an ancient spiritual tradition, involved entering trances to communicate with spirits. Shamans acted as intermediaries between the world of the living and the realm of spirits, often guiding souls of the deceased or seeking their counsel. Shamans would enter an altered state through ritualistic practices like drumming, fasting, or the use of hallucinogenic plants, and once in that state, they could guide souls to the afterlife, communicate with ancestors, or even ask questions on behalf of the living. This early form of necromancy was deeply intertwined with the belief that the dead had access to knowledge that the living did not. They were thought to possess insight into the future or hidden knowledge about the natural world. For the shamans, contacting the dead was a way of gaining this forbidden knowledge to aid their communities, whether it be for healing, predicting the success of hunts, or understanding natural disasters. As human societies evolved, so too did necromancy. One of the earliest organized civilizations to engage in necromantic practices was ancient Mesopotamia, where priests and magicians would call upon the spirits of the dead for guidance and prophecy. The Babylonians believed that the spirits of the dead could reveal the future, and they performed rituals to summon these spirits in order to gain political or military advantages. This practice was deeply rooted in their understanding of the afterlife and the continued influence of ancestors over the living. Ancient Egypt also played a critical role in shaping necromantic traditions. Egyptian necromancy was closely tied to their elaborate beliefs about the afterlife, particularly through the cult of Osiris, the god of the dead. Egyptian priests conducted rituals to ensure that spirits transitioned safely into the afterlife and to prevent malevolent entities from returning to the world of the living. Although Egyptian necromancers didn't raise the dead in the way we might imagine today, they did invoke spirits to guard the living, guide them in important decisions, and protect them from harm. In Greece, necromancy was a key part of several mythological narratives, solidifying its role in the Western imagination. Greek necromancers, known as psychopomps, would descend into the underworld or summon spirits to gain insight into future events. One of the most famous stories is that of Odysseus, who traveled to the underworld in Homer's Odyssey to consult the spirit of the blind prophet Tiresias. This form of necromancy, called katabasis, a descent into the underworld, was practiced by ancient heroes and later by magicians seeking to mimic their feats. Skull necromancy, another ancient practice, involved consulting severed heads for prophetic wisdom. The most famous example is Orpheus, whose severed head was said to continue singing and prophesying even after his death. Such macabre practices highlight how necromancy evolved from ancestor veneration to a darker and more mystical art by the time of the Greeks. Necromancy is not just a concept found in myth and legend. It appears in several religious texts, particularly in the Bible. One of the earliest references to necromancy comes from the Old Testament in the story of Saul and the Witch of Endor. The tale, found in 1 Samuel 28, is one of the most famous examples of necromancy in religious literature. King Saul, desperate to learn the outcome of an upcoming battle, seeks out a medium after banning such practices from his kingdom. He consults the Witch of Endor, who summons the spirit of the prophet Samuel. Samuel's spirit delivers a dire prophecy. Saul and his sons will die in battle, and Israel will fall to the Philistines. This story is significant because it reflects both the fear and fascination with necromancy in ancient Israel. Even though Saul himself had outlawed the practice, his need to know the future pushed him to break his own law. The Witch of Endor is a central figure in this narrative, and over the centuries her depiction evolved from a simple necromancer or medium to a full-fledged witch. Early interpretations referred to her as a pythonissa, a term linked to the Oracle of Delphi in Greece, suggesting that necromancy was a form of divination akin to oracular consultation. However, by the 15th and 16th centuries, Christian theologians began labeling her as a witch, reflecting the growing association of necromancy with witchcraft. Necromancy wasn't limited to Israel. In ancient Greece, it was woven into many aspects of their mythology. Figures like Orpheus, who famously descended into the underworld to retrieve his wife Eurydice, used necromantic powers to communicate with the dead. In another story, after Orpheus's tragic death, his head was said to continue singing and giving prophecies. This practice of using severed heads as a conduit to the spirit world, called skull necromancy, became a recurring theme in Greek and Roman literature. The Greeks also believed that certain locations held special power for necromancers. One such place was the Necromanteon of Ephyra, an ancient temple where people came to consult the dead. This temple, located near the confluence of the rivers of the underworld, was a gateway to Hades. Visitors would perform rituals and sacrifices to summon the spirits of the dead, seeking answers to their deepest questions. Archaeological evidence suggests that these temples were also used to create elaborate illusions, possibly using mechanical devices to convince participants that they were truly communicating with spirits. By the time of the Middle Ages, necromancy had undergone a dramatic transformation. What began as a practice of ancestor worship and divination had evolved into something much darker. The Christian Church, which had grown increasingly powerful during this time, viewed necromancy as a heretical practice, inherently tied to demonology and black magic. During the 12th and 13th centuries, a clear distinction emerged between natural magic and black magic. Natural magic involved manipulating the forces of nature, such as using herbs for healing, while black magic involved summoning demons, spirits, and other supernatural forces. Necromancy by this time had become synonymous with the latter. It was no longer just about communicating with the dead, it was about controlling them, and often controlling demons as well. Texts from the period often conflated necromancers with sorcerers and witches, portraying them as figures who wielded forbidden powers. The Church saw necromancy as a direct challenge to its authority, because it suggested that humans could command powers that should be reserved for God. In response, necromancers were increasingly hunted, tried for heresy, and executed. However, despite the Church's efforts, necromancers continued to operate in secret, developing their craft in ways that blended magic, astrology, and demonology. One of the most significant shifts in the practice of necromancy during this time was the introduction of astrology into necromantic rituals. Medieval necromancers believed that celestial forces, such as the positions of the stars and planets, could enhance their ability to summon and control spirits. This fusion of astrology and necromancy became known as astral necromancy. The figure who took necromancy to new heights in the 14th century was Antonio Monomo, an Italian scholar and astrologer. Monomo developed a system known as astral necromancy, which combined elements of traditional necromancy with the study of celestial forces. This system was revolutionary in that it attempted to unite various magical traditions, astrology, demonology, and necromancy, into one cohesive practice. Monomo's most famous work, De Ultis et Manifestis, laid out the principles of astral necromancy. He argued that spirits and demons were not confined to hell or the afterlife, but resided in the airy regions between the earth and the moon. By aligning rituals with astrological events, necromancers could summon and control these spirits. Monomo's text was one of the first attempts to systematically codify necromantic practices, drawing on sources ranging from ancient Greek philosophy to Islamic astrological texts. His ideas about summoning spirits based on astrological timings were groundbreaking. In his system, the power of a necromancer was directly tied to their ability to harness celestial forces. Spirits were believed to be more powerful when certain planets were in alignment, and Monomo's rituals were designed to take full advantage of these cosmic cycles. Despite the heretical nature of his work, Monomo managed to avoid the same fate as many other necromancers, possibly because he was able to mask his practices as scholarly astrology. His works were studied in secret by magicians and alchemists long after his death, and his influence can still be seen in modern occult traditions. While necromancy might seem like a relic of the past, it has persisted into the modern era, albeit in more symbolic or rebranded forms. Today, necromancy no longer involves literal communication with the dead in most cases, but its influence can be seen in various cultural practices, modern occultism, and even conspiracy theories. In the 19th century, spiritualism gained massive popularity, particularly in the United States and Europe. Figures like the Fox sisters claimed to communicate with the dead through seances, sparking a movement that echoed ancient necromantic practices. Tools like the Ouija board, invented in the late 1800s, became symbols of this new wave of necromancy, though framed as a way to connect with loved ones rather than raising the dead for dark purposes. Interestingly, the concept of necromancy has also influenced scientific endeavors. In the early 20th century, experiments with electricity, such as those conducted by Luigi Galvani and later popularized by the story of Frankenstein, attempted to reanimate dead tissue. While not truly necromancy, these experiments reflect humanity's age-old desire to control life and death, echoing the same themes that drove necromancers centuries ago. Necromancy has also found its way into modern conspiracy theories, particularly those involving secret societies. Some theorists claim that elite groups, such as the Illuminati or Freemasons, practice necromancy as part of their rituals. These theories often suggest that these societies communicate with ancient spirits or demons to gain forbidden knowledge and control world events. One of the more famous theories involves the Skull and Bone Society, a secretive group at Yale University. Some conspiracists believe that its members engage in occult practices, including necromancy, to maintain their influence in global politics. The fact that the society uses a skull and crossbones as its symbol only adds fuel to the fire for those who believe in these dark connections. Another popular conspiracy theory suggests that the Vatican holds secret knowledge of necromancy in its archives. Some believe that the Church, which once persecuted necromancers, now hides its own involvement in occult practices, using ancient, necromantic texts to maintain power. While there is no evidence to support these claims, they highlight the enduring fascination with necromancy and its perceived link to power and control. Necromancy, a practice shrouded in both mystery and fear, has captivated human imagination for centuries. Its journey from ancient shamanistic rites to medieval sorcery reflects a deep-seated desire to breach the divide between the living and the dead, to seek knowledge from realms unknown, and to challenge the very nature of life itself. In today's world, the fascination with necromancy has not diminished. Its presence lingers in modern-day spiritual practices, occult traditions, and conspiracy theories that suggest hidden elites still wield these dark arts in secret. Though its form has shifted over the ages, the essence of necromancy, a quest for forbidden knowledge and control over death, remains a powerful symbol of humanity's timeless curiosity. As we look to the future, necromancy stands as a reminder of the limits we are willing to push, the mysteries we seek to unravel, and the profound questions that still haunt us about life, death, and what lies beyond. If you enjoyed this in-depth exploration of necromancy and want to uncover more esoteric knowledge, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We've got many more mysterious and intriguing topics coming your way. See you in the next video.